Salam everyone, I'm Zurairi A.R, Assistant Foreign Editor at the Straits Times. Welcome back to Asian Insider, where we go across the causeway and explore Malaysia's current affairs and trends every fourth Friday of alternate months. Joining us from Kuala Lumpur today are two guests. First, of course, our Malaysia Bureau Chief, Shannon Teoh, and our special guest, historian, writer, and educator, Eddin Khoo.
Thank you.
And since we are recording this right after Chinese New Year, Kong Hei Fat Choi, Eddin and Shannon, how has the new year been treating you both?
For me, it's actually been a very quiet one. Just dinners with family, no big deal. But actually, that was a good thing because there was a fair bit of news flow last week, and we didn't have to scramble too much for it because most of us.
Yeah, usually Chinese New Year are slow news days.
Yeah.
How about you, Eddin?
No, it was very solitary. I went to see my mom. That's about it. Had a family reunion, I think, the night before.
Yeah, Eddin, I'm most familiar with your work in Pusaka, an essential Malaysian organization to conserve our traditional culture and arts. But for those who are not familiar with you, maybe you can briefly mention your stint in journalism and what are you up to these days?
Well, I started out in journalism in the Star back in the 1990s. And then I had a short break after a period of reformasi. And when some of us felt a little uncomfortable being doormats. But I spent some time with the foreign press after that, and then started Pusaka. I still continue to write, and now I contribute to The Edge.
In this episode, we'll be talking mostly about the intersection of education, history, and the minority communities in Malaysia. Specifically touching on a series of announcements made by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim in January 2026 as part of his reforms into the education sector. But before that, Eddin, you were recently interviewed for this Straits Time feature on Kelantan's Chinese minority, a community that I understand you spent years studying. In the story, our correspondents Hadi Azmi and Lu Wei Hung showed how the community has spent centuries weaving itself into the Malay heartland. Eddin, in the article, you noted that there's been an encroachment into Chinese spaces in Kelantan that never used to exist before. And if I remember you saying that this started only 4 or 5 years ago, but Kelantan's Chinese, they've been under past rule since the 1990s. So what specifically changed 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, the Chinese community in Kelantan are very interwoven. We often think of the Peranakans on the west coast of Malaysia. But in fact, the Chinese in Kelantan and Terengganu have been there even longer. And they are a very well-knit community in the society. Their sense of being Kelantanese is sometimes really very formidable, even more so than the Malays sometimes, I find. But I think what we need to remember, what has happened over the past 5 over years, is a huge generational mindset shift. And, we've been talking about this for a great many years, how when PAS first came into power, they had a certain approach to governance, but they were also very aware, the more senior leaders, of the cultural fabric of Kelantan. That has changed, of course, with younger leaders, because younger leaders are less rooted in community and sense of culture, but very rooted in ideology. So I think administration has started to maybe move into areas that it didn't used to traditionally. And while PAS has governed the state now for almost 30 years, they've never been able to win the minority vote. That has always gone to the traditional BN parties, right? But they're not sizable. I think maybe 5%, 5.
But we're talking about the Chinese minority. That's I think 2 to 3%.
Yeah, 2 to 3%.
Altogether, it's probably about 5.
You got about 5%. So they've never been traditionally PAS voters. And then there's the Thai community, of course, also very strongly
the Siamese.
Barisan. Because, of course, they see Barisan as being the more open of the parties. Yet the relationship between PAS and the communities have always been strong and continue to be strong. But we have noticed in the past 5-6 years, there's less of that kind of cultural acknowledgement of other people. So things tend to be a little more restrictive. Yeah.
Yeah, in the story also we've examined the tension that economic pressures are more and more pushing the young out of Kelantan. But do this diaspora of Kelantanese Chinese, they've moved to KL and Selangor, do you think that they still carry that identity with them, much like the Kelantanese Malays, or has they been assimilated instead by the so-called West Coast environment?
No, there's been a wave of them who come here. But the sense of Kelantan identity is still very strong. So they maintain their roots. They return to Kelantan very often. Many Thais from the Tumpat area, for example, have settled in Kuala Lumpur. And they run things like, they work in the motor industry.
Yeah.
But they go back very frequently, not just to see their families, but for festivals, Loy Kratong and things like that. So it's very strong. Whether that will be passed down to the next generation is another question altogether.
No, Eddin, we do see some assimilation. Sometimes on social media you see some funny clips about Kelantanese in KL, and they try to speak with a local accent.
Yeah.
But they get caught out and they say something.
Yeah.
So like if you ask a Kelantanese to say clinic, they always say clinic.
Yeah.
Right? And then they get caught. So you get some of this. Do they end up having a bit of a bipolar kind of split personality when they're in KL? They are sometimes, depending on the social circle, try to behave a bit more West Coast.
Yeah.
Right? But then, in their own comfort zones, then the Kelantanese-ness comes out.
Yeah.
Is that what happens?
Yeah, I think so. And but they also gather around and they speak in dialect a lot.
Yeah.
But when they sometimes when Kelantan folk try to assimilate kind of pretentiously, it gets quite funny. In fact, my first encounter with the Kelantan dialect was with a classmate of mine, who had come from Kota Baru, joined our Form 5 class, and not far from here, near the American Embassy, was the biggest key post of 7-Elevens that had just opened.
Okay.
That was then in 1986 or 1987. And this guy kept saying "sebe lebe," and none of us could understand what it was. But yeah, they carry the identity, I think, very strongly. So you get videos, for example, of Chinese and Indian Kelantanese gathering together and speaking Kelantanese, and then posting it on YouTube and things.
Yeah. Of course, apologies to all our Kelantanese listeners. Of course, all three of us are not Kelantanese. Perhaps one day we can talk more about the Kelantanese
please,
culture.
Let me correct you. I'm an adopted Kelantanese.
Adopted
Yes.
Kelantanese. Okay.
33
Sorry
years.
about that.
Yeah.
Okay, now we go to Shannon. The article frames Kelantan as the only long-term, like a real-world test of how political Islam actually governs the minority. PAS is now arguably Malaysia's largest single party in parliament, and a return to federal government may be imminent. On that note, as a minority, how do you think should non-Muslims or even non-Malays across Malaysia read this Kelantan experience of how the Chinese are treated in the state?
Yeah. Well, I think there is the political aspects and then the non-political aspects, right? And from both kind of, if you dissect it down the middle, there's also direct and indirect lessons that you can glean from it. Of course, the direct thing is, what kind of policies does the past think is harmonious in a multicultural society? So if you've read this story, and I think everyone should read it, it's a really good story. In Kelantan, if you're in a minority, you can drink, you can eat pork, but in these special restaurants, right? It's, they have specific labels. You can have entertainment, but you must be gender segregated, right? And some would argue that in Kelantan, look, the recent news flow, right? You can't even have pig farming in Selangor. You can have pig farming in Kelantan. So there's certain things that if you try to kind of have a very black and white view of this, political Islam is like this. No, it doesn't really translate so easily in what, especially from the Chinese view, is considered secular and what is considered conservative, right? So those lines are not so easily drawn. But I think even with just imagine for a moment, like we were speaking about how Kelantan has been governed by PAS for 30 years. There was a time when PAS was governed by BN. And if you kind of have in a sliding doors moment, what if BN had never lost in Kelantan? Would things be different? Would it kind of like the social policing be different, right? Would we not have gender segregation there? Would we not have these special restaurants? So I don't think it's also fair to think that the river only flows one way. That the political class set out the rules and then people just take it and accept it. I think there is that even if it was UMNO that was still in power, some of these things about how society works there would still be there today, right? It's not directly a past thing. It is a Kelantan thing, right? Because if let's say we take Penang, for example, and think about how Penang is culturally, and it's different from Kelantan, different from many other states as well. Would it be different if it was still Gerakan, for example, that was still running a state? I think culturally, it'd be the same, right? I think the differences, if you want to talk about the different ideologies that might govern a state, we think about governance, we think about economic policies, right? I think that there's a case if you were in Pahang, you might be concerned if PAS takes over, then there'll be the end of Genting Islands, right? Their casino. Those are very specific cases, right? What else about Pahang life would change? I don't think that much, right? That would be my view. I think where we take the inference here is also for PAS right now. Of course, now they're on the rise and their new Perikatan Nasional chairman is from PAS and stuff like that. Is that what is their governing chops? And we've come to realize that actually they don't have that many technocrats, right? We keep hearing the same person who is now the PN chairman, Dr. Samsuri, but who else, right? And I think that's where, I think that's the Achilles heel for PAS. Because if you think about the past states, the SG4 as they call it, the 4 states, how are they run as economic entities? There's no real storyline coming out there. But if you look at Penang, in the 2 times it was governed by federal opposition, the early Gerakan years and the early DAP years, right? There were economic leaps and bounds, despite being in the opposition. PAS has not been able to show that. So I think that's the real lesson to take up, not so much about the social ordering of life.
Yeah, okay. That's an insightful comment. Eddin, beyond your work in history, you also chair a government reform task force on national and vernacular education. So this next story is pretty much in your wheelhouse. Malaysia has just clarified the pathway for holders of the UEC, the Unified Examination Certificate, or those mostly from private Chinese schools to enter public universities. But it comes with a condition. Malay language and history must also be taught in those schools. So it sounds like a compromise, but it's already sparking pushback. So like, for example, like Dongzong, they are calling for history curriculum to also reflect the contributions of the minority. And then we have the opposition parties like PAS saying that, this move is just trying to, it's a concession to the Chinese community. So in your opinion, right, Eddin, has the government actually found a durable solution when it comes to recognizing UEC, or are they simply just kicking the ball to the future for someone else to deal with?
The UEC essentially involves about 5% of students, very small number. Yet it's a refraction of the road to hell that Malaysia can find itself in, even in the most seemingly amenable or logical situations. Okay, I think in terms of the UEC, and I was chairman of the committee, and we conducted our work for about close to 2 years. You begin to see essentially that this is a cultural battlefield. You're actually never going to please anyone. I think the government's suggestions are pretty reasonable. In fact, they were my suggestions in a report that they refused to accept, receive from me. But never mind. At least the pointers. Although I was more broad in my approach to history, so I wanted a general paper introduced, whereby it's history, it is administration, it is civics, everything encapsulated, so that the hard line on the other side can't bring up all kinds of other issues. But Dong Xiong had a problem with that. because they do believe that their system is a lot superior, and they carry that superior attitude into any kind of dialogue. I think it's first of all, the one thing that I took exception to was this term recognition, because the entire battle now is around this term recognition, which really doesn't make sense. Because what UEC holders are asking is for a kind of allowance, permission to enter.
Okay.
Whereas
Kind of exemption.
exemption, So recognition is a very
Okay.
contentious term, because what are you actually recognizing? Are you recognizing that
Okay.
examination, or are you recognizing the entire system? And no national system would actually recognize an alternative system. So I think that's a catch-22. Even when I suggested that we change the term, both sides didn't want to back down, because essentially the fight is in that term, you see. So once you dilute that term, then you can get down to the matter that to the real matter, which is essentially a technical one. So when you look at things, I think the UEC definitely reflects the levels of absurdity sometimes in which we allow our cultural wars to go, right? And nobody has any sympathy and empathy for the real, well, not victims, but the people who actually undergo this travail, which are the students of the UEC, and the education system itself, which is already pluralist, but somehow only with this UEC issue, there seems to be so much contention.
Out of curiosity, what are some of the suggestions that you've made that wasn't taken or accepted and then announced by the Prime Minister?
No, my report was just never received. Nobody wanted to see me. Nobody wanted to consult with me to get the report. And then you had successive ministers of education who said we never handed in the report. But here I am sitting for now going to be 4 years already, waiting for one minister of education or another to consult.
And you've been shouting from the top of the hill. This is not your first podcast.
Exactly.
Right? Telling them that there is this report, do you want it? But no one seems to.
Yeah. But, I've also been very clear about what my position was. And, not to sound immodest or anything, but I think some of those suggestions have been taken, right? Right now, I think it's a big move forward for the students, because many of the students of the UEC like to have a choice about whether to go to China and Taiwan or to enter local university. So they do something called double tracking, which is they do the UEC examination and the SPM examination at the same time. So they are, grappling with about 24, 25 papers. So if you can reduce all of that to 2, that would be of great benefit now. That was my suggestion in the end. Of course, the other thing that I did advocate was, let us get rid of this term recognition and use some kind of other technical term which really is reflective of what the issue is.
And what would you suggest that technical term be?
No, it's just exemption or a pass or something like that.
Okay. Shannon, we talk about this politically. Like, given Anwar needs both Malay and non-Malay support to hold his coalition together going into the next election, for example, with this UEC thing, right? How do you think, how sustainable is it, the balancing act that he's doing right now, going to the next election?
Even before Eddin came into the picture, when he was still young and naive and trusted politician, that was not the first move towards whatever is the term you want, recognition or exemption.
Yeah.
Najib's time, right? We're talking about 2011, 2013. There was already this move, and Najib was trying to win back the Chinese vote, and there's all this talk about pretty much the same thing, right? Using UEC qualification as you would with A-levels. And all you need is a credit in Bahasa, right? And at the time, a certain Muhyiddin Yassin, right, was education minister, right? And on record, he said he agreed to the proposal. But any number of cabinet ministers, leaders from MCA, so on and so forth, when they start telling the backstory, say that the education ministry was the stumbling block.
Yeah.
And they wanted this, that, or the other to be extra. Of course, Muhyiddin at the time was was playing the arch nationalist, right, to Najib's so-called good cop. Malaysia has had this history of prime minister is a good cop, deputy prime minister the bad guy, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that the only reason why it's not sustainable, not sustainable politically, is not even about the people, right? I think the same point Eddin was making. I think to a certain extent, the Malay nationalists on one side of the debate, Dongjong on the other side of the debate, I think they would make certain concessions, right? You do it. But there are politicians out there who will use this for personal gain, right? And whether it's on the UMNO side, DAP side, SUPP from Sarawak or whatever. And the problem now for Anwar to try to get this done is, Najib's right, everyone's right. Anwar's biggest problem now is that DAP is his ruling partner, right? And DAP has become this lightning rod for demonization of all sorts of anything DAP wants. It must be anti-Malay by definition. We don't even know why it's anti-Malay, but if DAP wants it, it must be anti-Malay, right? That's really the kind of narrative that goes on. So So if I think the real reason that is unsustainable, you have to use that term, is that if in fact DAP was not in government and it was only MC and Gerakan, I actually think Anwar could get it across the line. Now I'm not so confident.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
The DAP are not so blameless either.
Of course, they're not. But
but we also should remember that it was actually Dr. Mahathir who, on 2 occasions, tried to get this through. 1999 was the first effort to recognize the UEC, and then he got into a huge broil with the Dongxiong, and eventually led to calling them communists and everything. And then in 2018, I must say, it was his administration that set up this Jawatan Kuasa, this committee, right? So yes, it does seem that people use this for political fireworks. As for Datuk Seri Anwar, I don't know if it's just a little too late for it to make an impact. So much cynicism has crept into this issue. And even when you have a report or a study that is rational, nobody wants to take that line.
Okay, let's move on to another announcement. Another policy that was also announced at the same time, which is Malaysia planning to lower the entry age for Standard 1 from currently 7 to 6, starting in 2027. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? But within days, the government then walked back on one part of the plan, which was like a diagnostic test to make sure whether you can enter or not at 6-year-olds. So, Shannon, of course, this was after critics saying that, the test can be harmful to the children and all that, discriminatory. But do you think the rollback, right? Do you think this is a showing that the government is actually responsive to public feedback, or is it just, they don't actually think much before they actually announce all these things?
Well, I think both things can be true, right? That yes, of course, it is responding. People have criticized the rollout due to the fact that there's not enough detail, and so the government say, "Oh, we go back to the drawing board and then we do our stakeholder engagements and stuff like that." And the other thing is also true. Why didn't you do your stakeholder engagements and have a good sense of what the entire? So it's not just. It's easy to think that this is just about are kids ready to go to school at 6, right? It's not that question. Are parents ready to send them to school at 6? Is your entire preschool it's an industry, right? It's a big industry, kindergartens and stuff like that. Are they ready to lose kids 1 year earlier, right? Where is all the preparation? So it is actually exactly like how we expanded sales and service tax, right? We included all these items thinking that, no, we just include the items. There is no knock-on effect. Until people started saying that, especially on rental. We started including sales and service tax on rental and thinking that it hurts landlords and tenants, but every business pays rental. Right? So there's a knock-on effect everywhere. So somehow this is a government that likes, or I say government, but actually let's just be frank, it's a prime minister, right? And it's one of my greatest criticisms of Anwar, right? There's goods and bad, but he seems very interested in announcing things. I don't know why, for fear of not looking like he's making changes, that he's stamping his mark.
Got KPI lah.
Yeah, like that he has to this week I haven't announced anything. I need to announce something, right?
Oh.
So the question remains, why announce a big national education blueprint when it's not ready? Not ready, just do it in March lah, or May lah, or whenever it's ready. So that question still is up in the end. Now what you have is that your two signature policy, which is on the UEC and Standard 1, are hanging up in the end. No one knows actually if it's happening or not.
Yeah, continuing from Shannon, like Eddin, do you think Malaysian children are ready to go to Standard 1 at 6?
It's very bizarre, if you ask me, this whole national blueprint thing. How many national blueprints do we need? I mean, by the time, you read all these national blueprint things, they fill up this whole room. And it's as if we understand that education is a major concern for people. What is the need to lower the age?
Yeah.
People are not concerned about whether children, they're already going to preschool, they're going to play school, they're going to kindergarten, they're going to homeschooling and everything. The age of 7 is fine. People are not concerned about that. They're concerned about things like the syllabus, the curriculum. They are of the social makeup of national schools. They are concerned about what this contention is between the UEC, and that's what people are concerned with. And if you ask me, I think a lot of people are looking for more and more liberal forms of education, right? Even among Malays, the push to get into Chinese independent schools today is very great because they want to menguasai, or they want to, command the Chinese language. So there seems to be two kind of parallel conversations going on. One is a bureaucracy, ministries, governments, cabinet, whatever level of conversation. I don't even know what the hell goes on in there. And then there's the desire of the people, essentially, to see a real consolidation of the national education system. Even those people who send their children to private school or Chinese school, a lot of the center of their conversation is about the plight of the national schools. Right. And what is our national
education system? Parents, and I'm one of them now because I've got a 9-year-old, are not sending their kids to, as you say, more liberal forms or other kind of streams because we really want to.
Yeah.
It's that we are trying to avoid the mainstream kind of, because we've lost faith in it, right? And it is not a dogmatic thing. My kid must go to a vernacular school, or my kid must go to international school, which is doing A-levels or GCSEs or IB or whatever. That's not there. Everyone just wants good education for their kids, right? And what is available out there, right? So it's a question of at some point we had, international schools were not easy to enroll. They only allowed a certain amount of
and expensive.
And they were for foreigners. If you are Malaysian, you needed a good reason. Ambassador's child, you were already in a whatever stream, and then so you went to those schools. Now it's open, it's free for all. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but can we have policymakers actually decide, do we want a very free and open kind of education system? Everyone decide whatever you like, right? A very market driven. Or do you want to standardize policy, consolidate, get the best kind of mainstream national education system? And then the rest is all at the fringes because there is a pocket of Japanese expats, so then you have one Japanese school or whatever it is. But I don't think anyone is ready to make this decision.
Yeah, we can't take a step back from the pluralist nature of education in Malaysia. What I think should happen is that there should be a lot more conversation between all these various streams to contribute towards the common good. How do curriculums influence each other? And nobody is having the first major conversation that every conversation on education should have, which is pedagogy, which is basically what are our children learning? How are they being taught? What is the element of creativity in the curriculum? There's none of this kind of conversation. It's just constant, as you said, policy announcements that change after 3 months.
The next government education minister comes.
Yes, exactly.
He wants a blueprint.
See, one of the things that has been of great concern is that we are producing exam molds and paper chasers. So one of the things that a minister like Dr. Mazdi, for example, advocated was to have a more holistic thing. Less heavy school bag, I think, was one of his calls, which I think is a very good thing. But there's no follow through at all, and we're back to the same old, exam orientated conversation. And another thing about education is I don't understand why we are constantly always talking about education in schools, not having the concomitant or the corollary, which is public education. Nothing is said about public education. That also should come under the domain of the Ministry of Education, because sometimes even parents need to be educated, sometimes even more so, actually.
Okay, now it's finally time for our News Nugget segment, where we share some of our more offbeat stories. Okay, here's a question that shouldn't be controversial. Should the people of KL get to vote and choose who run their city? In most democracies, that's, just what you call a local election. But in Malaysia, the mere suggestion of an elected mayor for the capital has triggered so many alarm bells, especially among some Malay Muslim groups. So let that sink in for the moment. But setting aside the politics for a second, let us ask Shannon and Eddin, if you were elected mayor of Kuala Lumpur tomorrow, what will be the first thing that you would actually fix? Shannon?
I'm going to cheat and use kind of a big term, which stands for a lot of things. I think livability in KL. Now, we're in danger of becoming as stressful as some of the other great capitals in Southeast Asia, right? Manila, Jakarta, Bangkok. If you're there as a tourist, it's all fine. You try it, but if you're living there, it can be a strange kind of hell, right? But you see, also what those cities like Jakarta and Bangkok have, there's a lot of charm. It's not that KL doesn't have charm, but some of that charm has been washed away in our case for development. Now we are in danger of washing away some of our livability as well because of terrible town planning. There's nothing else to say about it, but it's terrible town planning. I mean, a lot of when people think about livability in KL, it boils down to traffic a lot, right? And we have all these questions, traffic and, public transport and all that sort of stuff. Road planning, walkability in the city. So, and every so often a minister will try to fix it, and then that's why we have this air-conditioned walkway between KLCC and Pavilion and stuff like that. To those, listeners who are familiar with KL, all this stuff. But then it's just one stretch. And it's not a major change of thinking of town planning, how to make everyone be able to walk, right? And stuff like that. And I tell you, we tolerate nonsense. Us KLites, we live in the city. Just a very simple example. There's a developer near where I stay. I'm just going to name them and shame them. Paramount, right? Terrible. They bought over this plot of land. They want to build a high-rise condo. Okay, by all means. But the plot of land is right in front of the school. Okay? So, but they choose at 7 a.m. to park a big truck or cement truck or whatever truck there, right on, is a 2-lane road. So they park it there, then how is the traffic supposed to flow around there? That's one. Two is also at that time of the morning, you decide to fog their construction site so that the kids going to school, will not have mosquitoes in their lungs, is it? So there is no civic mindedness. There is no sense of being a corporate citizen in the city. It's just very profit driven. And I think that comes back to this idea of KL City Hall is not run like a local council. It's run like
cabal.
A parent developer. Like, I'm building a new township, and so then I want to make things must be built all the time, right? But for what reason, for what purpose, nobody knows.
Yeah. Eddin?
Well, I can publicly announce here that if mayoral elections open, I wish to stand. This is my city. KL is a very depressed city. It can be so much more than it actually is. We are in danger of getting to the Jakarta-Manila thing, but we're not there yet. So let's be grateful for that. But I agree with everything that Shannon says. I think one of the first things that need to be regulated is the financial ecosystem not being created at all. I would, of course, I want to use the word flush out the town hall, but I'll just use the word regulate instead. And I think the relationship between local authorities and developers really need to have some kind of transparency. So I think, and then comes other things like transport. You see, the air-conditioned passageway, for example, it's very successful. Saloma Bridge is very successful. Many other things in KL, like our MRT, LRT, are pretty efficient. But I can't understand the two gerabak and not anything more.
Two coach.
Two coach thing.
Not MRT enough.
So
it's not mass rapid enough.
I find that all quite strange, right? And somehow the citizens of or the inhabitants of Kuala Lumpur are not privy to any kind of conversation that is going on. So I think it's really about time that some people are trying to derail this conversation. I mean, KL is different experience, right? So people in KL, I think, do think very differently. It is now a Malay majority city. And it's very funny that, some of the complaints or the anti-local elections rhetoric comes from people who just completely ruined the city in the first place in their various capacities as minister of federal territories. I have Mussolini fantasies about some of these people. I think it's about time. I think KL should lead the way. We don't need to have local council elections for every city. Let KL lead the way, and create the culture and structure for it. And let's Malaysians remember that our nationhood and our electoral democracy was born from local council elections in 1955. That was how we showed ourselves to be mature enough to hold national elections. Why that is never a reference when we have this conversation, but all kinds of gobbledygook otherwise about ethnicity and race and, this community overpowering other. But I tell you what KLites need to do, now that the gates have been opened, let us not fail in continuing the conversation and putting the pressure on the authorities to see this through.
You heard it here first, folks.
Eddin
Khoo running for mayor if there's a local election in KL. For me, it's simple. I think I'll shut down a lot of roads and make it a bit harder for cars to enter KL. So people will have no choice. Okay, so that's a wrap for this edition from Across the Causeway. Thank you, Shannon, and our special guest, Eddin, for being with us today.
Thanks very much.
This has been Asian Insider. I'm Zurairi A.R. We have links to the articles we mentioned throughout in our podcast show notes, and you can also sign up for our weekly Asian Insider Malaysia edition newsletter too, written by Shannon. If you like what you heard, please share this podcast with your friends and family. This episode was produced and edited by Faiza Sani. Terima kasih for listening. To our Chinese listeners, hope you have a good time. Cap Gome coming. And of course, to our Muslim friends, selamat berpuasa. And in advance lah, salam lebaran Aidilfitri. Maaf zahir batin from us in the Straits Times. Kosong-kosong, okay?